Arun Seth bringing you this session on playing the long game, the innovation and focus of it. I'm pleased to introduce Beerud Sheth, founder of Gupshup, who set up Gupshup in 2004 and has seen pivots and at least 2 near-death experiences. Brilliant at academics, and an IITian and an MITian, if there is such a word, and went into Wall Street, but moved early into tech. He founded one of the first gig economy startups that's listed now as Upworks and now steering Gupshup to become one of the unicorns this year. But Gupshup is different. It's profitable. That's right, you heard. It's profitable, and more on that later. Gupshup turned unicorn after 15 years. The push is on innovation, understanding how customer experience can change, pivoting, and the right business metrics. This fireside chat explores how the unicorn journey has been different from the others and what lies ahead, not just for Gupshup, but for our entire product ecosystem. So, Beerud, let's start with something which goes back in time, which is, and I would describe you as an entrepreneurial genius who was possibly ahead of time. That's a good or bad thing. You are more than free to mention that. But you founded Elance, which is now Upworks, when most people did not realize the power of freelance community. And Gupshup, a messaging platform for the non-smartphone era, being ahead of its time. Is that a good thing for entrepreneurs who are listening? So question is, how do you identify these opportunities and put your big bets?
Well, firstly, thanks for having me here. Good to see you again, Arun, and good to chat with you. I think as an entrepreneur, of course, it's better to be early than late, right? Because these markets get taken very, very quickly. And oftentimes first mover advantages are significant, right? So you need to be better. It's easily better to be early than late. The problem is sometimes if you're too early, like in my case, I was preaching remote work back in the late 90s, where it was surprising. Many people would be like, how can I trust somebody I can't see? What if they run away with my money? What if they work in a different time zone? What if they, don't speak the same language? And 2 decades in a pandemic later, now it's conventional wisdom, right? And the same thing with Gupshup as well. We saw the power of SMS as a platform, and it's only now, SMS and then other messaging channels are emerging. I think the not so good part about being so early is that it can be a long journey until the market turns and the ecosystem catches up with where you are, right? And this is where it takes a lot of perseverance and grit, and especially in the down times, it can be very challenging. But your question about how to spot these things, I think, typically it's you have to keep an eye out for these technology transitions. Right? Anytime, it's almost like an earthquake, right? A seismic shift, like these tectonic plates that are shifting, and that creates these opportunities. So, for example, when we went from feature phones to smartphones, that was just that ushered in the whole mobile revolution, or even further back than that, when we went from desktop app to the web, right? And the whole, there was a flourishing of a whole lot of new ideas and so on. Even now, I think as we are moving from a world of mobile apps to sort of conversational messaging, right? Gupshup is sort of riding this transition as well. And usually, I think when these sort of transitions happen, that creates new opportunities, because without that, all you have is you have to compete with incumbent giants and leaders, which can be a much harder thing to do. But the moment there's a new transition and a new sort of framework, you're no worse than any established player, right? So it's sort of a clean slate. You can start from first principles, and you are at a level playing field compared to any other player. And that's maybe the simplest way to answer that question.
Oh, thank you. That's quite amazing that you've been through these transitions, and you spot on how to identify these opportunities of this when these tectonic plates shift. So one of the other things is that we do share a common background. I'm from telecom, and you started in telecom long ago. But now, the current opportunities that you have, which are with WhatsApp, et cetera, are there. But with 5G coming in, what do you see as potential opportunities? Will that disrupt your current business? What will happen? What do you think? is things that people should look out for, and where are those opportunities, especially for you?
Sure. Well, every new wave of technology, I mean, these are tech transitions, clearly, will disrupt everything, right? And I mean, again, there's a cliche in Silicon Valley where if you don't disrupt yourself, somebody else will, right? So we completely anticipate these disruptions, and in fact are prepared for it. And we're always asking ourselves, okay, what part of our product portfolio, what part is not going to be needed, and therefore what else should we do to hedge against it, to adjust for it, right? And the companies that have survived for a long time, let's say Microsoft, right? It's been very successful at evolving through these tech transitions compared to, let's say, an IBM, which sort of struggled through many of those things, right? So I expect, see, with every wave of every step function in bandwidth, it is, there has been newer applications, newer areas of opportunities, and so on, right? Clearly, when we went from just mobile data to mobile broadband, with 3G, 4G, and now with 5G, of course, as a whole, another step function in capability. I expect, video and entertainment and so on, which already is pretty good, to take off in a much bigger way. Many other cases around edge computing and so on. But as it relates to us with messaging, I think messaging gets a lot richer, gets a lot smarter as well. Traditionally, as you know, a lot of enterprise messaging would be focused on SMS as the platform, but now it's evolving into richer messaging channels such as WhatsApp, such as RCS, such as even Gupshup has launched something proprietary that we call GIP, which is just short for Gupshup IP. But the point is the ability for businesses and consumers to be able to chat with each other through two-way conversations is going to get much more rich, much more advanced. Imagine if you can get instant customer support, could be video, could be chat, could be voice, the ability to get help and not just help, but you can use it for marketing, for commerce, for support. And these may or may not be with human agents. It may be with automated software agents and so on, right? So I think we are really diving headlong into these new trends. We're building up for it, expanding rapidly. And like I said, yes, there will be some disruption, right, for some parts of our offerings. But the only way, right, you can't worry about it. The only way to move forward aggressively is to take advantage of the opportunities. Any of these transitions offers threats and opportunities, and you kind of have to say, okay, how do you minimize the threats, but more importantly, dive into these opportunities.
No, that's just spot on. You're saying, so it's a follow-on question there, which I have for you, that you're now not just only in India, but you're now globally out there. I remember you telling me that you're very big in Brazil, et cetera, et cetera. How do you see innovation playing a role for you to stay ahead of the curve? For example, I read that you're trying to do interoperability amongst various platforms. I hope I read that right. How would you differentiate, and where do you see this going?
Oh, I think, innovation is perhaps the only thing that kept us going across strategy pivots, across, market crashes, the 2008 crash and other sort of external factors and so on, right? I mean, I'm a firm believer in the fact that, there's no situation that you can't innovate yourself out of, right? You can always figure out a way. And sometimes it's technology innovation, sometimes it's business model innovation, or even organizational innovation as well, right? So I think of it more broadly. You're right that we've expanded internationally just over the last year following our funding. We are now in about 25 plus countries and continuing to scale up. In all the mobile first ecosystems, LATAM, Southeast Asia, Middle East and Africa in particular, what we are seeing is, we've had enormous success and traction in India, and these other mobile first ecosystems are very, very similar. And they're somewhat different from developed markets, right?
I hope they pay more than India.
I think if you can succeed in India, you can succeed anywhere, right? It's a very competitive, very challenging environment with some of the most demanding customers. And I don't think that's a bad thing. I mean, it really forces you to innovate harder. And then if you succeed here, you can succeed anywhere.
Well, right? Just before this, I was speaking to somebody in the US, and he was saying the Indians want a Lexus at the price of a Maruti.
But if you can deliver it to them, you can take over the auto market worldwide, right? So I think, look, you know, as an entrepreneur, you always look on the brighter, the glass is half full kind of perspective. So no, but the point I was making was, look, in the Western markets, you know, before smartphones came about, email and then voice and call centers were very, very prevalent and popular. But the mobile first ecosystem really, you know, jumped onto the internet with smartphones, right? And therefore the intensity and the richness of use cases, the customer requirements are so deep. For example, in China, right, WeChat is a super app that enables everything. We see similar trends playing out in other parts of the world, right? So I think we really focus on going international, on driving a lot of innovation. Again, some, you know, you may have some revolutionary innovation, but there's also a lot of evolutionary stuff, right? Just having dedicated pods of engineers that are focused on different geographies or different use cases, listening very carefully to these customers, getting inputs and feedback and so on. And that's how a lot of this innovation can happen. And I think that's a huge advantage. In fact, I'm very optimistic for India being a base of innovation because, you know, while it lasts, there's a cost advantage, right? You can hire more engineers and deploy them for more use cases. And that's how I think, you know, SaaS software built in India for the world is going to be a huge major trend. So absolutely, you know, we lean into that. We use it as a source of competitive advantage. And it allows you to, you know, do trial and error, for example, because you can experiment and see if a product or an idea works or not, and quickly iterate through it. So all of these are advantages, you know, for Indian companies. And I think I'm very optimistic. You look at the Freshworks IPO and so on. I think there's going to be many other things, many other companies to follow. Yeah.
Yeah, I know, because there's a companies like, I mean, I helped to incubate in Mobi. So these guys are thinking of an IPO. There's so many companies who are now thinking of going public so quickly. What about you? While we are talking of that, is that something on the cards, or you're in no hurry? Because my next question there is, I love one of your comments. I was a cockroach that happened to turn into a unicorn. We'd love to know a little more on, you know, the Cinderella moment in your life.
Well, not as dramatic as you might think it is. Well, you know, look, fortunately, I've been on this entrepreneurial circuit for a very long time. That allows you to be a little more grounded and a little more balanced, right? So you don't get super euphoric when the good things happen, and you don't get super depressed when the bad things happen, right? So yes, it was a good milestone. We are happy that we accomplished it, but we also realize, you know, that there's an awesome responsibility that comes with it, and we have to continue driving up, right? Just because you become a unicorn doesn't mean you stay a unicorn, and there's certainly no guarantee that every one of them will stay that way, right? So you kind of have to keep pushing even harder and so on. But yeah, I think in our case, you know, we'll look at sometime next year, maybe in the second half of 22. That's the current plan. But as you know, this is all subject to market circumstances and so on. So we'll see how it plays out. I think the way I always think about it is, look, if you focus on building value, then the valuation will follow. You know, we've at least at Gupshup, we've built a high growth business with good margins, with profitability. Like you mentioned, yeah, that's unusual among most of these unicorns. So, you know, we've been careful in delivering value and monetizing that as well as we scale. And we'll continue to do that. We're driving some, you know, with the fundraise that we've done, we are driving some M&A transactions as well. We're driving global expansion, investing a lot in R&D. So as the flywheel keeps turning faster and faster, I think that should generate more value. And if we succeed in doing that, you know, then the investors and the public offerings and so on will take care of itself. Another important thing is an IPO is, again, just another sort of milestone, right? Not a destination, because investment bankers and investors will come and go, but the management team is left holding the bag. You still have to deliver quarter after quarter. And, you know, if you're not set up as an organization to be able to have predictable growth, that's what the market looks for. And if you're not set up as an organization to do that, that can be a huge problem too, right? So there's no benefits, there's no reward for rushing into it, having a successful listing, but then, you know, struggling with it in the quarters that follow. So I think we're just being very careful. You have to be, you know, you should only go out when you're ready. You know, don't do it for the press releases. You can't, you know, start believing your own press. You really just have to say, okay, what's real for the business, and what's real for the customers, right? Your customer reality is the only true reality, and that's what keeps us focused and grounded.
Right. And as I said, I happen to have a little more years than most of you. And I've been through 2001, 2008, and others. And my sense is, and this is me talking, I mean, that, what goes up goes down at various times. What would you advise companies, you're profitable, you've been through this one. What are a couple of thoughts that you would give to people to, look out for at this point in time? I'm not saying it's happened, but at some point it'll happen.
Yeah, I think, Warren Buffett's famous saying, right? It's only when the tide goes out that you find out who was swimming naked, right? And it's kind of a joke, but, I think market circumstances can change. It's outside our control, right? Whether the Federal Reserve and its monetary policies, what happens to interest rate, what happens to global, I don't know, some geopolitical event in China or whatever, right? I mean, there are so many external factors that we don't control. And in many of these scenarios, the funding markets can dry up. Your customers may decide not to spend as much or get very conservative. Suddenly, if that happens, a lot of the growth goes out the window. And if you don't have a business model and you're dependent on subsequent rounds of funding to keep the company going, well, that can be sort of you can run out of runway at some point, right? So it's a real challenge that entrepreneurs have to be careful about. So I think really, yes, like I said, growth is important and it's paramount. And there's plenty of businesses that are focused on growth first and the business model later. So I'm not against, companies being unprofitable in the short term as they drive, enormous growth and try to capture the market, right? But I think you have to be agile, you have to be flexible, and in particular, you have to think about the sort of the risk factors, right, to the thing. What if you can't turn the corner before the funding cycle runs out, before the music stops, as they say, right? So I think, yeah, just build a team, build some resiliency. I mean, again, if you hired a lot of employees who are sort of mercenaries, not missionaries, I mean, soon as you can't offer the next huge pay raise, they might sort of go away to other companies and so on. So if your culture is not strong, if your team is not resilient, if your strategy is not mature and developed, I think that can cause a lot of problems. Now, we could all get lucky, right? The markets could stay as they are and it sort of doesn't matter, but I think you can't take that for granted.
Thank you. And I think we are coming to the end of the session. So it's been fascinating speaking to you. What would you leave as thoughts to founders and current founders, future founders? What's inspired you and how do you write through things? Because I read a comment about you asking 3 things of God.
Oh, no, I think really, I mean, I was referring to the serenity prayer, which says, look, give me the courage to change the things I can, the patience to, accept the things I cannot, and the wisdom to know the difference. Right. And I think the point is, as an entrepreneur, you don't control everything and you can't get stressed out about things. You can't personalize it. You stay focused on fighting the good fight, really doing the best that you can, and controlling and innovating and things that are in your control, right? So really, that's the main point. And I think it's a fantastic opportunity. It's a great time to be alive. I think there's so much funding. There's so many ideas. India is on the move. There's sort of the grand digitization project in India underway, right? Which over the next decade or two will do what happened in China for the last 2 decades and US even before that. So it's an awesome opportunity and time, but just stay focused on what's real, right? Sort of don't drink your own Kool-Aid, don't read your own press releases, focus on the product, the customers, the business models. I think if we succeed with that, may 1,000 startups bloom. I think it's a great time for India.
Thank you, Beerud. This has been absolutely fascinating.